Western media reacting to something they cannot deny anymore. The Ukrainian counteroffensive has completely failed. Despite months of propaganda hyping up the Western offensive, the Ukrainian offensive, despite weeks of propaganda saying that Russia is this weak country that's on the verge of defeat in Ukraine, now they are forced to admit the reality here. And we did a breakdown of the MSNBC segment of this. No, there was another CNN segment on this. This is Anderson Cooper reacting to this. So this is what they're reacting to. So this is the article that came out yesterday at CNN, and there was another one that came out. Was it Business Insider? I forgot who else reported on this, but CNN been reporting on this because they have to, because Ukrainians are getting slaughtered. 40,000 dead in a few weeks, and that's a low estimate, and it's counteroffensive, and they only got 100 square kilometers. It's a absolute disaster. Literally exactly what we was warning people about way before the counteroffensive happened. For real. This is why RBN grows, because our credibility. Because we told you this weeks ago. We told you guys weeks ago that this counteroffensive was doomed for failure. So now these people got to come on TV and they got to explain to their audience why they lied and bullshitted to them for so long. So this is going to be greatly enjoyable.
Long before Russian forces invaded, it was understood they outnumbered and outgunned Ukrainian forces. So when Ukrainian troops managed early on to roll back a good deal of that invasion force, hopes were initially high they could quickly finish the job. It's not worked out that way. And now new reporting tonight that there's growing concern among Western allies about Ukraine's counteroffensive and its fate. In a moment, we'll talk to a retired three-star general for his take. But first, the exclusive reporting from CNN's Jim Sciutto, who joins us now. So what are you hearing from your sources about what they believe Ukraine's prospects are right now?
A markedly negative turn, Anderson, and these are sources I've been speaking to since the start of the counteroffensive, but even going back to the start of the war. And expectations of this counteroffensive were quite high going back just a few weeks ago. But in recent weeks, as Ukrainian forces have encountered really intense Russian defenses in the east and the south, 3 lines of defensive lines, defensive belts as they're known, with trenches as you're seeing there, tens of thousands of mines. Ukrainian forces have not proven able to break through those lines. They've encountered staggering losses, I'm told, both in terms of killed in action and wounded in action. And Ukrainian commanders, in response to that, understandably have pulled back some of those units to
That's a very rare admission that on CNN. As someone who watched a countless amount of these propaganda segments on CNN, they will always talk about the amount of Russian soldiers that are dying, despite the fact that the Ukrainian soldiers are dying at around 5 times more clip than Russian soldiers. Way more Ukrainian soldiers. I mean, to the multiple degree, are dying compared to Russian soldiers. But they come on their corporate channels every day like, oh my God, Russia is losing. This counteroffensive is going to be amazing. We're going to destroy Russia and they're going to be embarrassed. And now they are forced to report on this reality that we've seen it come in from a long time ago. And you have the West and you have Chris Christie and many others that are like, yeah, let's have more Ukrainians die. Let's keep this going. Let's keep this going until Russia is defeated. Do you guys understand how psychopathic they are? Anyway, let's continue.
I'm told, both in terms of killed in action and wounded in action. And Ukrainian commanders, in response to that, understandably have pulled back some of those units to save some of those casualties. And while even a few weeks ago, the hope was that over time they'd be able to break through, more recently, the assessments both on this side of the Atlantic, but also in Europe, have been that they don't quite see the opportunity. So that hope has faded, not entirely faded, but it has certainly become a much less hopeful outlook for their prospects for success in gaining.
You guys see the sub-headline here? It said officials fear Ukraine's slow counteroffensive may spark blame game between Ukrainian officials, and we already starting to see the cracks form. There are already cartoons in Ukraine that's criticizing the West for not doing enough for them. There are Ukrainian soldiers that are being blamed by the West for being incompetent because they're apparently supposed to learn how to use these weaponry with only weeks of training. They was doomed to fail. We knew that. The corporate media knew that. And what's even more disgusting is that the NATO left, Bernie Sanders and Marianne Williamson knows this, but they are willing to allow Ukrainians to die because they're intense Russophobia. They don't care if 5 Ukrainians die, as long as 1 Russian dies for every 5 Ukrainians. You guys understand? That's how unhinged their ideology is. Let's continue.
Back significant territory.
This also takes into account, I mean, there were a large number of Ukrainian forces trained for a length of time by U.S. forces in sort of combined weapons tactics and movement. That still has not been able to deal with the trench system, the mining, the defensive system that Russia had time to set up.
No, and what I'm hearing is that the expectations may simply have been too high. When you look at the training for some of
you don't fucking think. You don't fucking say, sir. This is 3 for 3. 3 of these fucking segments, some motherfucker comes on and say, oh, I think the expectations for the Ukrainian counteroffensive was too high. You don't say, sir. That is exactly what we were saying from day one. From day one, we told you guys that these Western officials and these media operatives that are pushing for a counteroffensive are just trying to get Ukrainians killed. They stand no fucking chance at defeating Russia and having a successful counteroffensive. And when we told people that they would never have a successful counteroffensive, we was called Putin propagandists. We was called Putin propagandists when we told you guys that Ukraine has no fucking chance. Tommy Tuberville, let me pull this up right now before I forget. Tommy Tuberville was criticized by the liberal corporate media. He was criticized. Here's the Hill. Because this is what Tommy Tuberville says. Tommy Tuberville, the unhinged senator from Alabama, some fucking red state, who gives a shit. He says Ukraine can't win the war. It's a junior high school team playing a college team. Now, I may cover this with CJ tomorrow, but Morning Joe did not like this. Morning Joe did an entire segment where there was like, this is just another example of Republicans being captured by Putin. Why they hate America so much? Because Tuberville and these right-wingers, these people who don't get any issues correct, this issue is so easy to get wrong, these morons can tell that Ukraine can't win. And then Democrats and liberals melt down and pretend they're unreasonable. Meanwhile, you got this general who just admitted that the expectations were too high.
Russia had time to set up.
No, and what I'm hearing is that the expectations may simply have been too high. When you look at the training for some of these newly supplied Western weapons, for instance, German Leopard tanks, you're seeing maybe 8 weeks of training. That is not a lot of time. And the thinking is, from speaking to military officials, also diplomats, is that the idea of turning Ukrainian armed forces into a capable, credible, mechanized fighting unit in that short length of time may have been a bridge too far. That even with advanced Western weapons and training from the best in the business, right, that the time frame was short, and that even for the best.
You don't fucking say. So now they admit this. So now they're saying that, man, maybe it was kind of naive to think that just because we can send them weapons, that they can somehow defeat one of the strongest superpowers that we ever seen. You don't fucking say. It never was realistic, you unbelievable motherfuckers. These people push this counteroffensive that never made sense. And guess what? The NATO left goes along with it. Can't emphasize that enough. Let's continue.
U.S. combat brigades, months, years of training still make it difficult to break through these kinds of lines. So with weeks of training, it just may have been too high a hope.
Oh my God, I want to replay that part because he said something that should have been obvious to everyone. I want to replay it, so let's listen to it. Because he essentially says, even if you took our troops who are well trained and know exactly how to use all this military equipment, even they will struggle against Russia. Okay, that's exactly what we all knew. So if well-trained, experienced soldiers will struggle against a Russia defensive, why would anyone believe the poorly trained, corrupt Ukraine military be able to do the same? So I don't understand how Anderson Cooper and these Ukraine propagandists are not embarrassed to admit this. You're not embarrassed to publicly admit this because you guys been so wrong about this issue for months. You had the NATO left that have been gaslighting us, telling us that the Ukraine with this counteroffensive, even though they have untrained, constricted soldiers in. Listen to this part again.
U.S. combat brigades, months, years of training still make it difficult to break through these kinds of lines. So with weeks of training, it just may have been too high a hope.
You guys didn't figure this out before. I'm the dumb college dropout that is not worth talking to. But you're the smart college dropout. You probably got a master's degree, don't you? You probably got a master's degree. You was really good at hitting the books. You had a lot of work ethic growing up. You got good grades, and you are now in high society, also because of that generational wealth. But you are a respected general, but you are so dumb, you didn't see this coming. But me, a college dropout, living in the middle of fucking nowhere in the Midwest, can see some shit that you guys did not see. I got into this game because I realized that we were ruled and governed by fucking morons, and every single one of us can run laps around these motherfuckers intellectually. I want you guys to realize the dumbest people in the world govern us. Us as workers, we are way smarter than these people. They are the result of privilege, opportunity, generational wealth, and corruption. All these motherfuckers are dumb.
You also mentioned in your reporting that the Western officials fear this slow counteroffensive could cause a gap amongst Ukrainian officials. What's the concern?
Well, you're already hearing it, right? I was in Aspen for the Security Forum just a couple of weeks ago. The Ukrainian president spoke there. And at the time, he said, listen, we'd like to have proceeded more quickly, but we didn't get the weapons and the training soon enough, pointing some fire, as it were, at the West for not moving quickly enough to support this counteroffensive. And you're hearing more of that. And the concern is that the unity of...
So you guys see how he explaining how Ukrainian officials, and we showed you the cartoon yesterday, how they say, man, if only the West did more for us. If only they was faster with the weapons. Guys, what else more could we have done? We gave them more than the equivalent of the Russian annual military budget in weapons and training. What else more could we have done for you motherfuckers? What else more could we have done for the Ukrainians? If the Ukrainians could not win with the weapons and ammunition that was given to them by the West, that literally fucking Germany ran out of weapons. So many Western countries ran out of weapons given to Ukraine. If you guys could not win with the amount of weapons given to you, you never stood a chance. You guys need to advocate for peace. Because what they were saying is, God damn Americans, you guys should send us more. Ungrateful Nazi bastards.
Of the alliance, both among Western partners in NATO, but also with their Ukrainian partners, that a blame game emerges, as one official described it to me. And that's a problem, right? Because unity is important, not just in terms of standing up to Russian aggression in Ukraine, but also maintaining political support, military support, etc. A lot of this is bubbling up under the surface, and the fear is that it bubbles up above the surface and creates divisions that make it more difficult to provide that support going forward.
Jim Shudo.
Good. You say it'd be more difficult to provide that support going forward if they don't get this counteroffensive going right. Now you guys see why there's so much pressure for this Ukrainian counteroffensive to happen, because there was many reports before this counteroffensive that the Ukrainian forces was not ready. It was not preparing for a counteroffensive. They was pressured by NATO in the West and the corporate media to go on a counteroffensive. Because if they did not go on a counteroffensive, it would have been harder for the Western countries to justify sending aid to a country that is not making any gains. That is why they told them, you guys are going on a counteroffensive right now. We don't care if you guys are ready. This is extremely important for us to secure funds for our money laundering scheme. That's exactly what happened. So the Ukrainian people, knowing that the West are their boss, they went along with this counteroffensive, even though they admitted they was not ready because they were trying to secure more Ukrainian funding. And like Zombie Sassy, this is a funny comment. And 45,000 lives later, they says, oops, maybe we should have waited. Maybe we should have been more prepared. No, but you guys didn't have that option. You guys had to do the counteroffensive right now, because if they did not, there would have been even more calls to end Ukraine aid. You would have been even more discussion like, nigga, what the hell are they doing? What the hell are they doing? So they was forced, and now it's backfiring. And this is glorious. I am loving every second of this. I am loving the fact that Anderson Cooper and CNN are being forced to go in front of their audience and say, hey, so we essentially lied to you motherfuckers about this shit for months. Let's continue. This is not going to be the last segment I'm doing this, by the way. I'm sure I'm going to see another segment where they're forced to do it, and I'm going to watch it. It's glorious. Watching these people be wrong about another war is going to be very interesting to watch. Anyway, let's continue.
Fascinating reporting. Thank you. And very concerning, obviously. CNN military analyst and
Right,
retired Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling has been
Oh,
following.
man. I might say this part for tomorrow. Yeah, I think I'll say this part for tomorrow. I think I did it good now. I'm going to say, I'm going to say this for tomorrow, because they got these other generals that come on. Actually, fuck it. Let's finish it. Let's fucking finish it. I let it play. Fuck it. I want you guys to see what
closely tweets
this
extensively about what goes on into a success.
So essentially, CNN is in such shit because they realize they lied to their audience for such a long time. They're like, let's bring on military officials to explain why we was fucking wrong about this. We need you motherfuckers to do propaganda. I'm not talented enough to spin this shit. I don't know what to say about this. So we need the people who are good at the propaganda, these now retired military officials, these CIA operatives, to spin this shit. So Anderson Cooper is like, guys, please help me. I'm struggling here. So I'm gonna play a lot of this uninterrupted because I just want you guys to hear what they say because we're getting late here.
Successful military operation, how this one differs from the standard Western model. Also with us, William Taylor, former ambassador to Ukraine. General Hertling, the idea that there are staggering losses and difficulty and inability to break through the multiple defensive lines that Russia has set up, I mean, that does not sound good.
It doesn't sound good to the uninitiated, Anderson. But you remember, you and I talked about this multiple times, dating back to the March-April timeframe, where I suspected when you're talking about a force that's going on the offensive for the first time, with a very large conventional force, with new weapons, with soldiers who have been reconstituted, and we're talking about Ukraine now, with tactics they haven't used before. They haven't completely transformed the military against the kinds of things that Russia has put in place over an 8-month period of time. Remember, Russia started mining and setting trenches starting back in October.
Can we just take a second to acknowledge what this is? Because I told you guys the United States is the most propagandized country in the world. We have Anderson Cooper, who is a Vanderbilt CIA operative, who is talking to retired military generals and CIA analysts here. This is what counts as news in this country. Meanwhile, people think that state TV in other countries is bad. This is the height of state TV. A Vanderbilt, CIA, and military-industrial complex people spinning war to you guys. What's more propaganda than this? There's nothing in China. There's nothing in Russia. There's nothing in any other fucking country that is more rank propaganda than this shit right here. I just want to take time to acknowledge that.
Of last year. So they had about 8 or 9 months to set the defensive conditions. And it's just very difficult. So what you have right now is a Ukrainian unit, an offensive, between 9 and 12 combat arms brigade over a very large front, between 400 and 600 miles, equal to the distance between Washington and Boston that they're attacking against an enemy who has had 8 months to prepare 3 extensive obstacle belts. That's tough. I have tried to do that when the enemy is just setting up obstacles in a day's time. And when I say enemy, I'm talking about the opposing force at our training centers. And any brigade commander will tell you this mission, an offensive against a defending enemy, is the toughest one that there is. I failed multiple times. I watched multiple U.S. brigades fail in this kind of mission, learn tough lessons and try and reapply it. So it's just very hard. This is combat. And truthfully, as much as Ukraine wanted to turn into a Desert Storm-like force from the very beginning, when you're talking about the offense, it's much different than the defense that they had for the first couple months of the conflict.
Ambassador Taylor, how concerned are you about this?
So, Anderson, we were in Kyiv last month and the month before. The foreign minister made the point that others have made as well, and that is, this is not the last battle. The Ukrainians are in this for the long term. They hope.
Listen to this psychopath. And this is why I want to show you guys this part. Because despite the fact that 40,000 plus Ukrainians have died in a few weeks, so many Ukrainians, there have been so much Ukrainian bloodshed that CNN is forced to acknowledge it. Meanwhile, this psychopath is on the right that says, we just getting started, son. Oh, you think a lot of Ukrainians died now? Nigga, just wait. We just getting started. Ukraine is getting started. We're gonna run through their entire generation of young men. Listen to this psychopath speak. This guy is something else. Listen to this. Here we go.
The point that others have made as well, and that is, this is not the last battle. The Ukrainians are in this for the long term. They hope they can end it soon. They hope they can do the breakthrough. By the way, General Hertling's exactly right. The line from Washington to Boston, that's the line. And the Ukrainians only have to find one place along that line to break through, whereas the Russians have to defend everywhere along that line.
At the cost of how many Ukrainian lives? You absolute psychopath. You guys lost 40,000 Ukrainians in a few weeks without any of these magic breakthroughs you're talking about. So how many Ukrainians have to die for this mythical breakthrough you're talking about, sir?
So the Ukrainians know that what they need to do. They know it's hard. They also know that there's more weapons coming. They know that aircraft are coming. They don't have their air right now. And again, if they don't win this battle, they'll win the next one. And if they don't win that one, they'll keep fighting, Anderson. They are not giving up.
Yes, they lost 40,000 men in 3 weeks. Yes, they lost that battle, but they're down to lose another 50,000. If they lose another 50,000, we're gonna sacrifice another 50,000 Ukraine. You think we give a fuck? And if we run out of soldiers, we're gonna grab more men off the street and force them to die in our war. This is a serious, grown-up conversation that is happening on CNN, on standard news in this country. And people still don't understand why I said we are the most propagandized country in the world. These 3 men having this conversation have some of the most unhinged ideologies, one of the most unhinged foreign policy compared to everyone in the world. They are the global extremists, guys. I want you guys to listen to that last part again, because that's bone-chilling what he is saying here. It's bone-chilling that he's willing to allow so many people to die. For what? For NATO expansion? What are you guys fighting for? Want tens of thousands of Ukrainians to die so they can be part of NATO. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians to die so BlackRock can own their country. You guys realize that's what they're doing? Sacrificing Ukraine so BlackRock can own them later. They're going to rebuild their country. So the West can own Ukraine later. This aid is loans. We only got 2.5 minutes left, so I'll let it play for a bit.
What they need to do. They know it's hard. They also know that there's more weapons coming. They know that aircraft are coming. They don't have their air right now. And again, if they don't win this battle, they'll win the next one. And if they don't win that one, they'll keep fighting, Anderson. They are not giving up.
So, General Hertling, I mean, was it a mistake to devote the time to try to retrain forces in new methods? I mean, I read one account that said, if they were able to break through those lines, those kind of combined movement operations, I don't know the exact term for it, but, smaller units making decisions, not sort of the huge hierarchy, and also moving in conjunction with artillery, with air support, things like that, that if they were able to break through somewhere, those new tactics would be beneficial.
Delusional. I don't know if you caught what you asked. Absolutely delusional. This is Anderson Cooper essentially saying that, hey, maybe it is the West's fault because they implanted bad strategy onto the Ukrainians. If only we allow the Ukrainians to fight the natural way they usually fight, maybe they operate in smaller units, they might be able to have a breakthrough. Absolutely delusional. Anderson Cooper, no matter what strategy the Ukrainians operate under, even if they had the greatest strategy that was ever crafted in military history, they are not defeating the Russians. You delusional child.
Yeah, it's a mix, Anderson. You know, I've said for a long time that the United States can't impart, and the Western forces can't impart their way of war on a Ukrainian force that truthfully has a post-Soviet bias. They grew up in the Soviet force where artillery was king. So truthfully, they wanted this new equipment. They wanted to transform their ground force. They are taking the first steps. And like Ambassador Taylor, I believe they will eventually get there. They're not there yet. This is a hard fight. I mean, there's no other way to put it. And all of the Western analysts that Jim was quoting a minute ago, I would bet none of the people he's talked to have been on the battlefield attempting to do the kinds of things the Ukrainian force is trying to do right now. I agree with Ambassador Taylor. Ukraine is going to continue to win this fight, but it is not going to be a quick victory because combat is not a video game.
So how does the force evolve? I mean, in this situation.
So you guys finally figured it out. They finally figured it out, guys. It took the genius on the left to say it. That war is not a fucking video game. And every single Western analysis, every single Western propagandist has been pretending that war is a video game. They've been pretending that Ukraine is playing Call of Duty. In every single fucking Call of Duty game, you fight the Russians. You either find the Russians or you find some sort of fucking terrorist cell somewhere. So for a long time, they've been trying to present this fucking action movie where Ukraine are brave, Russians are cowards, and they're going to break through in the action movie video game sequence. That is the storyline that you guys have been selling on people. You guys have been selling this idea that war is a video game where all Ukraine needs to do would be better on the sticks than Russia. If only they had a good strategy like you have in a video game, they'll be able to defeat a giant global nuclear power. So it took a year and a half. It took 45,000 dead Ukrainians during this counteroffensive, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dead Ukrainians, for someone to finally acknowledge that war is not a fucking video game. Congratulations, sir. You finally figured it out. You finally figured it out. You guys want to hear that part again? And I'll let it wrap up from here. But this is the part I was waiting for. Because they acknowledged that they was deeply unserious children pushing video game bullshit by telling people that Ukraine ever had a chance to defeat Russia.
Is trying to do right now. I agree with Ambassador Taylor. Ukraine is going to continue to win this fight, but it is not going to be a quick victory because combat is not a video game.
So how does a force evolve? I mean, in this situation, is it more training? Is it the new weapons that the ambassador was talking about? Is it going back to tactics that may have worked for them before?
I think it's a little bit of a mix.
What tactics? If only they went back to the tactics that worked for them before. Why do they have to go on the counteroffensive in the first place, Anderson? Because they lost a third of their fucking country because it was getting their ass kicked. So even as Ukraine is getting their ass kicked, as they lost a ton of territory, Anderson Cooper and them is still pretending that Ukraine has some sort of success. At no point in this war can you say Ukraine won, that this is a victory for Ukraine, that this is a great thing for Ukraine. And they still try to pretend. They're like, man, if only Ukraine went back to the good old days. If only it was like last year when Ukraine was winning. Sir, at no point was Ukraine winning this war. You delusional child.
They will continue to use artillery. We have given them the cluster munitions that will help. They won't be a game changer, but it will be ammunition that they can use against.
We gave them cluster munitions. We are enabling them regarding committing war crimes. We gave them cluster bombs and cluster munitions that's going to kill and harm their own civilians. So now they have a greater chance of winning. How does that make sense? These people are military minds. They are experts in this field, but they sound like fucking morons because they are.
Defensive position. But they are also learning as they grow, too, Anderson. You know, our training centers, we say.
Oh, they're learning. Oh, man, it's only 50,000 men died. Come on, man, it's the cost of learning. Yeah, 40,000 dead there, 40,000 there, yeah. At least the good thing is that we learned our lesson. Yeah, we got a lot of people who died in this war. Yes, we wasted billions of dollars, but isn't the most important thing the friends we made along the way? We made friends along the way. We had a learning lesson at the end of the episode like Family Guy. So isn't it worth tens of thousands of Ukrainians dying because we're learning lessons? He didn't really said that.
Will be ammunition that they can use against defensive position. But they are also learning as they grow, too, Anderson. You know, at our training centers, we say we learn and grow every day. And had even kind of...
They're learning and growing every day. Few thousand there, a few thousand down here. We learning, guys. We really having some character development during the course of this genocide of an entire generation of Ukrainian men. These people are hilariously psychopathic. Hilariously psychopathic.
Absconds the fact that we're failing on many times in getting scar tissue. The Ukrainians are learning how to conduct operations against these very intense and dense, complex obstacle belts. They will continue to learn and grow. They will find ways to overcome. They have a good morale in their force. They have great leaders, things that the Russians do not have.
Ambassador Taylor, there was this Ukraine peace summit.
They won't stop the propaganda even as they are forced to admit they are getting their ass kicked. Yeah, we get our ass kicked, but Russia suck, don't they? We only got a few more seconds, man. This clip is fucking hilarious to me.
In Saudi Arabia last week, China opted to send a delegation. Any takeaway from that, in your opinion?
The Chinese showing up for that is amazing, Anderson. That's a demonstration that the Chinese are, I think, starting to edge away, trying to edge away from the Russians. I mean, they know that, so the Ukrainians, that was a Ukrainian idea to have this summit, and the Chinese knew it, and all the other 41 nations knew it. They knew that the Ukrainians were going to make the presentation that President Zelensky has made, and it says once the Russians are out of their country, they'll sit down and negotiate. And territorial integrity, which means Russians out of the country, was agreed by all of those nations, apparently, according to the discussions.
Do I even have to explain why that's bullshit? So China, they pretend it's shocking that China is calling for peace. China has always called for peace. China presented the Chinese peace proposal that called for Ukraine, Russia, and the West, everyone to respect the territorial sovereignty of other countries. And after being told to respect the sovereignty of other countries, which include Crimea, which include Odessa and the Donbass, who won't be part of an independent country that Russia supports, right? They said no. And this guy is pretending that Ukraine is fighting a defensive war. Ukraine said, Zelensky said, there will be no peace unless they return Crimea. Crimea, where 80 to 85% of the population want to be part of Russia, a largely ethnic Russian country. You have Odessa, you have the Donbass, ethnically Russian territories that Ukraine wants to force to be Ukrainian. But they're pretending that Zelensky is fighting a defensive war. That's why Lula called them out. That's why Xi Jinping called them out. They say you cannot be a serious activist for peace if you're calling for Russia returning Crimea, because that is not happening. That is absolutely not happening. They're deeply unserious on the side of peace if you're saying that the only way we are going to end this war is Russia pull out and then we get Crimea, because as Lula says what Zelensky and Ukraine want is essentially a full-fledged surrender on the side of Russia. And that is not how serious people negotiate for the end of wars. So anyway, there's going to be a lot more segments where corporate media is going to be forced to acknowledge this failed counteroffensive, this failed strategy by the West. Let's see. Are there any more articles? Because who else is acknowledging this reality? Here's an article from Vox. I haven't read it. Oh, here it is. Look, I gotta read this and do a breakdown of this article tomorrow. I see this. What went wrong in Ukraine's counteroffensive? Even Vox is forced to acknowledge this. And as you guys saw in the clip, that guy like, come on, man, we gotta acknowledge that that war is not a video game. You guys been pretending it was a video game since the start of this war. Well, you guys thought that Ukraine was gonna defeat Russia. So I'm gonna keep covering this. This is very satisfying because once again, RBN called it from the very, very fucking beginning. Because our position, we are the only side that actually care about the Ukrainian people.